concrete and how long you let them cure, where you arrange the blocks of concrete, how you distribute all your forces, how you shape, and to do a lot of math about the weight and the pressure of the water and rock movement. But the basic details are pretty simple. Just like pouring concrete to build a retaining wall in your backyard, you secure it to the rocks on the sides and bottom, put a bunch of rebar, and then you fill in those connections with concrete, and it basically fuses to the sides of the canyon. Get to the top, put in the valves for the plumbing, build your diversion towers, get your electrical equipment added. This is Hoover Dam. Have you guys been to Hoover Dam by Las Vegas, Nevada? Yeah. And this is Lake Powell, the Glen Canyon Dam. Anybody been to Lake Powell? You can see the water that comes shooting. Remember I was telling you the high pressure water. You can imagine even the fish made it through the blender. It would be kind of bummed on this part. I've been told that if you put a school bus in front of these, it would get compressed to like 1.5 feet thick by the water pressure. I don't know what that equates to. But it's
I want to see like someone just tossing rocks in there.
I want to see you jump. You. Okay, who votes me? Who votes him? That's what I'm talking about.
Ripped apart.
You can imagine the river bottom is kind of narrow. The top of the canyon is obviously wider because the canyon walls flare outward. And this water, especially because it's Lake Powell, goes way beyond the visual horizon of this photograph. You're only seeing about 15% of the surface of Lake Powell. So the reservoir continues far out of sight.
Wait,
yeah.
What is that like second, like farther down? What is that?
This one?
Yeah.
That's diversion. So some of the water is made into electricity, some of the water is diverted because you can tell in this photograph it's pretty full.
Why don't they just put more generators and also run the diverted water to the generators sometimes?
It would follow to reason that you could get more electricity, but there's probably some economies of scale that any extra generators would only run part of the time. So their electricity market may not be enough to justify the cost of making more turbines. Also remember that they're venting extra at that moment, but in a 10-year drought, they wouldn't spill any extra water. So if you have a 10-year drought, that extra turbine would be totally offline. So it's kind of like, should we add a turbine just for those rare cases that we've got extra water to spill? And I think that there's probably some engineering math about throughput of volume on average, precipitation, electrical markets, pricing. Mechanically, you're right. There's no reason not to have more turbines if there's extra water. Economically, there's probably some trade-offs. So here you have it. The 6 mega dams of the Colorado River.
The two at the bottom are next to each other.
The two at the bottom are right next to each other, and if I'm not mistaken, the only reason that there's 2 is between those 2 there's a little desal plant. Because we have to desalinate the water before it goes into Mexico. If not, we would give them ocean water. It's so salty. Because of evaporation. We'll talk about that. Okay. So now I want to begin number 22, and I got to give you a heads up. In this unit, there are 10 study goals that address pro and con of dams plus the issue of dam removal. I'm going to run out of water, bro.
I'm not distracted. I'm just distracted.
If you'd like to have this debate, I'd love to. But I can tell you right now that you're not going to win.
Yeah, like in
That's not my
the
fault.
past, you haven't cared like some Mr. Head down, some.
Yeah, but
We changed also.
yeah.
You should give us a heads up.
Yeah. Okay, heads up. No more cell phones in my class. I'm kind of getting tired of it. It's sort of a.
I'll be the only one getting hurt, but.
Well, not hurt enough,
Yeah.
if I had my say, but it does actually, that is not a safe argument, because it sort of changes the culture of the class, like gossiping in class. If you were chatting with someone, that would be a distraction. But it also says like, well, maybe this isn't that relevant, maybe I should tune out too. There's just like snowball effect, where like a critical mass of kids using the cell phone, all of a sudden everybody's like, oh, this guy's a waste of time, I don't need a cell phone, I'll use my cell phone too. Generally there's a push school-wide to kind of crack down on this, and I agree with that. So if I haven't been consistent in the past, that's probably because I'm too distracted or not really that focused on it. But now that I hear other teachers are starting to crack down, I'd like to be a part of that. And if yours aren't, I'm sorry, I'll remind them too.
But you did good on it.
Oh, good.
So that's why I have it out.
I don't care. You're not going to win this argument. I don't want you to lose yourself in that class.
Okay.
Where was I?
Pros and cons.
Pros and cons of it. 10 study goals on this, big part of the unit. And I gotta warn you, there's a lot of details in this that students kind of fumble. So first I want to contrast a wild river with a dam, so that we can talk about how the river is changed. Remember, first of all, that rivers have a natural rhythm. Rivers tend to have high water when they are flooded with the most snowmelt, or in some cases at low altitude, they have high water when they're flooded with the most rainfall. So near sea level, we get high water in the winter. As we go uphill, we get high water in the spring. If you're really up at the top, right next to the snow, in Tuolumne Meadows, we get high water in the summer, because that water is slowed down by being frozen and it's got a time lag as the snow melts. Does that make sense to everybody? Low altitude, flood water is when you've got the most delivered by rain, winter. Going uphill, major snow melt, spring. Uphill of that, high levels at the hottest time of the year when the most snow is actively melting at once. These rhythms of flow affect rhythms of temperature. They also affect rhythms of sediment transport, because at high flow, the river can carry a lot of stuff. So remember, first of all, wild rivers have natural rhythms. They have dry times, heavy times, more load, less load, more nutrient, less load. Some rivers actually peak in the summer, like in the tropics where most of the rain happens during the summertime. This is the Amazon. And the Amazon has its high water in the middle of summer. Some rivers have their high water in the middle of winter, like right after a major storm, like the Yangtze River in China. That's coincidentally a really violent flood. I believe that there's a bridge underneath this. You can see the steps going down.
Correct.
Yeah, heavy times, natural rhythm. Now, you've got to think of why we want dams. Like, we all want electricity in summer in the desert. So the dam is going to block all the water when it's common in winter. Who the hell needs more water in the winter? Hold on to it when it's cheap. So in the winter, when the river would be flooding, that's when we clog the river. And then in the summer, when the river would be dry, that's when we really need the water for electricity and for our water customers. The whole point of a dam, if you think about it, is to do the exact opposite of what the natural river does. I mean, any way you want to describe a dam, its function is to prevent the river from doing what's natural. Sometimes people just want a dam to prevent flooding and keep a city safe. Well, that's preventing what the river would do naturally, because the flooding is a natural cycle. If you want a river for irrigation, you're going to need the water when there isn't any coming from the baby Jesus, and so with no rainfall, when the river would be dry, that's when we're going to be moving the most volume for irrigation. And if you want electricity, that's probably at peak demand during the summer when the river would otherwise be low, the exact opposite of what it would do naturally. I think you guys know that I'm an evolutionary biologist. Did I tell you about this? My degrees are in ecology and evolution with an emphasis in evolution, zoology, and physical anthropology. I picked my majors so that I could focus on the evolution of behaviors. And so for me, I think about everything on an evolutionary time scale. And think about it, each river has its own unique rhythm, and thus each river has its own unique ecosystem. On the Colorado, the fish are evolved for muddy, warm, seasonal water. On the Columbia, the fish are evolved for really cold, not very seasonal, kind of year-round, clear water. Every river has a unique set of conditions, so every river has an especially evolved food web. And check this out. A dam changes every variable of the environment. You might want to know these. Dams lower the temperature of a river because reservoirs are deep. So the reservoir usually has some really cold layers on the bottom, and that's where the water comes out. Dams make the water less turbid or more clear. Turbidity and clarity are the same concept, except one of them is the positive extreme, one of them is the negative extreme. You know what I mean by that? High turbidity means there's a lot of murkiness in the water, so clarity would be low. They're both measures of clarity, except this is a measure of high clarity, this is the word for the measure of low clarity. What's that?
Antonyms.
They are antonyms, yeah. So a dam lowers turbidity, or in other words, makes the water higher in clarity. The volume and flow rate will change. Anybody know why the volume of a river would be changed by a dam?
Got all that water in the reservoir.
You've got the water in the reservoir, but once your reservoir is full, doesn't the volume come back to being the same again?
Oh, there's no evaporation.
Yeah, the big deal is there's a lot of evaporation.
More surface area.
You have more surface area, and you raise the level of the water from the shady, wind-sheltered bottom to the sunny, windy desert surface. You guys remember that photograph of Glen Canyon or Lake Powell? All that water is at desert level. The top of the desert is often 20, 30, 40 degrees hotter and 10, 20, 30, 40 miles an hour windier than the bottom of the canyon. So by raising the level, you expose it to evaporation. Most dams in the desert evaporate as much as 50% of their water. So if you think about it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 major dams on the Colorado, that's a lot. of changes in water volume and in the rate of flow. Yeah.
Is that called more rain?
It would follow a reason, right?